Well, let's get to the topic of the day. Tonight, we want to discuss the way forward for Kenya when it comes to industrialization. Oh yeah, and you know for sure that the manufacturing sector's contribution to the gross domestic product in this country, has stagnated at about 11% in the last 12 years. The debate is how to move it forward to around 20% of GDP by the year 2030. The question is, how do we get there? Joining me in the studio tonight is Samuel Matonda. He is the Business Development Director at the Micro Small Enterprise Authority. Thank you so very much indeed, Samuel, for finding time to be with us here. And next to Samuel, we have Ashok Shah. He is a director with Infinity Business Park, which is, by the way, the first privately owned business park in the country. He's also an industrialist. He's joining us tonight to give this discussion, some perspective. Thank you so very much indeed, Ashok, for your time.
Thank you.
I want first of all to start with you, Ashok. You are a reputable industrialist in this country. What are the challenges, when it comes to expanding our industrial base as a country?
There are lots of difficulty people are facing establishing industries here locally. First, it start with the company registration, and it comes to first whether you have the PIN number first. Now to get the PIN number, they said you have to have a work permit first. Foreigners who want to put up an industries here. So we have to make a easy doing business conducive environment. And this is the kind of challenges that the first step. Then when it comes to the due diligence, when somebody want to put up a industries here in Kenya, then we don't have a conducive environment where all the facilities and amenities are available at one place. So this is the kind of difficulty people are facing. And we have to work on it. Government especially have to give assurance to the investors that Kenya is a place where we can do the easy doing business.
And, at the heart of Kenya's industrialization project is this micro, small, and medium enterprises. How are they well positioned, to be part of this drive, Samuel?
Thank you. What I'll say is that the government is focusing now on the micro and small enterprises, given that through the cottage industries, which once used to be called Juakali, but it's no longer Juakali because the government has really committed to develop work sites. We have more than 428 work sites across the country and 158 constituency industrial development centers, which have been upgraded by the government. Why it's important, the Micro and Small Enterprises Authority has been focusing on that through the funding from government is because the government has actually prioritized all the sectors that the Micro and Small Enterprises Authority is focusing on. We are looking at manufacturing. We are looking at agribusiness. We are looking at services and the trade. And we have quite a huge number of Kenyans, more than 84%, who are really getting involved in small and micro businesses. And that is what the numbers, the volumes, and the diversity of the activities that they are doing is what is going to really revitalize the manufacturing sector. Yes.
You see, when you look at, MSMEs,
yes,
or SMEs if you like it, they contribute about 98% of all businesses here in the country.
Yes.
And they create, their job creation is about 30% of all jobs created annually. But when you look at the policies, that have been put in place, starting with taxation or taxation requirements, the other thing being, the infrastructural development in this country, would you say that the government is walking the talk when it comes to facilitating small, medium enterprises, into becoming the Safaricom's of tomorrow?
What I'll say is that indeed the government is focusing on micro and small enterprises, and that is evident from what the government has done in the recent past. I've just mentioned that there are 158 constituency industrial development centers, which have not been, most of the past many years have not been in use, but the government pumped in a lot of money, which have seen these centers across the country being fast-tracked to completion. Those which are almost complete have now been occupied. Those which were not operational are being operationalized. And common user facilities have been, you saw the cabinet secretary, the former cabinet secretary for trade, industry, trade and cooperatives, when it was one ministry, Honorable Peter Munya. What he did is that he launched machinery and equipment that were being transported across the country. That is a big step because those machinery and equipment were purchased through funding from the government to assist the MSMEs and the micro enterprises to utilize them to fast track their production, to be able to innovate their products and automate whatever they are doing. Instead of maybe making one piece per hour, they'll be able to make now more pieces and of uniform and constant quality, so that they are competitive. That is one.
And the question is this, I mean, you know, turning what used to be Juakali sheds and giving them another name, I mean, it's not definitely, you know, going to turn them around, you know, overnight. But I'll be coming back to you, you know, to try and find out what has been the impact. But I want to hear from you, Ashok. You are in this business. I mean, you are into the business of establishing industries in this country.
Industrial park.
Being from India, you know, which is a superpower, you know, in terms of many aspects, economically, military-wise, even industrialization. Tell me this, where do you see the disconnection between how India is carrying out its industrialization agenda vis-a-vis how we are doing it here in Kenya?
No, in India, you know, government gives lots of incentives to the people who want to establish industries in and government itself, they are developing lots of industrial park where they are giving some subsidies to promote the industries. Now industrialization is the key thing to create the job opportunity for the locals. And well, our government also trying and giving some incentives, that bringing plant and machineries duty free. Raw material, there is no duty on some of the raw materials. So that is how government is trying. But government have to facilitate the industrialist with easy doing business here. That is the most important thing. Now another thing is that Kenya is relying on 85% of import at present. So Kenya has lots of potential to establish many industries over here, to attract many industrialists to come and put up industrial park, I mean industries over here. So, I mean, government have to now look into that, how they can promote industrialists.
Industrialists.
Yes.
Tell me this, I mean, when you look at India, when you look at China, Taiwan, South Korea, you know, these were the pioneers of industrial parks.
Yes.
Back in the 80s.
Yes.
You know, Kenya has been trying, you know, to borrow this concept and launch its own industrial parks. But when you look at the pace we are moving, we've been talking about the Dongo Kundu industrial park. We've been talking about the Naivasha industrial parks. They are yet to be activated.
Yes.
What is not happening? Are we serious, or we just talk but no action?
You know, like many people coming here, contacting us, they want to put up an industries over here. But they are not finding, I mean, the kind of support they want from the government. Like right now, many places we have to get approvals, many government department we have to visit. Okay, government have heavily invested into infrastructure development, so that is very good and plus point for Kenya, that our road infrastructure, SGR, Lamu Seaport, our geothermal power stations are now producing sufficient power. These are the major plus point, plus expansion of our airport. So we have a lot of potential that, and another thing is under the Commercial Treaty there is no duty in Africa. So many people are looking at that they want to establish an industries here, and that is what we have to tap, and government have to attract them to come and invest in Kenya.
Samuel, when you look at the way our SMEs, they carry out their business, are you convinced that they are ready to compete in a highly competitive environment like Kenya, whereby Africa is becoming one market?
Well, that's why picking on what I was saying earlier about the government's assistance to this sector through equipment that can be utilized under common user facilities, which are either work sites constructed by the government or these constituent industrial development centers. And we also have a Biashara Center that is at Kariobangi. What the government is doing is that we are assisting these micro and small enterprises to be able to really do what the world is doing, because the global market is open and they have to be competitive. And the mechanization is one way of making these SMEs produce quality and consistently quality products, and also exposure to markets so that they are able to see what the others are doing. And sometimes most of them I see them doing reverse engineering as well. So the Jua Kali you said that was before, and the SMEs that you have today, can say that it's not the name that has changed, but there is a lot of improvement, because most of these SMEs are actually competing favorably in the market. Nevertheless, having said that, we know that the African Free Continental Trade area is soon being operationalized, and we are keen to that, and that's why we actually advancing and enhancing their capacity through the associations. We have so many of these SMEs operating in silos, lonely, but then of course we are encouraging them to come together as associations, and we have so many of those, so that they are able to even produce mass, because the global market requires quantities as well. Apart from quality, they also require quantity. So we are bringing them together, the small micro enterprises coming together in associations, and that is how they are able to meet the demand that is growing.
Some of these, I mean, you see, the SMEs in Kenya, they're not competing against Kenyans. They're competing against East Africans, against Africa, against the whole world.
Yes.
And a typical SME in Kenya, the products that they produce or they manufacture are things like wheelbarrows, like feeding troughs and so much. And the world is moving into an era whereby sophistication is becoming the key. When you look at the kind of things that are being manufactured by our SMEs, how do we plan to help them to upskill their work and get into the technological field?
Well, first, when they are manufacturing these simple equipment like the wheelbarrows that you just mentioned, first, initially, the kind of wheelbarrows they were producing, most of them were actually not consistent. You could find maybe the arms others are short and others are long, but now we have instilled in them the essence, and we are working very closely with the Kenya Bureau of Standards and other research agencies like Kirdi. And that's why what I mentioned about the Biashara Center in Kariobangi, where all these government institutions have been brought together. And actually, His Excellency the President mentioned that they have been brought together so they can bring service closer to the SMEs. And the machinery, the equipment we are talking about, for instance, they were using crude methods of even cutting the metal sheets for making the wheelbarrows, for instance. But now we have machinery and equipment that they cut it now using the equipment that we are supplying, which I've just mentioned that they are being used in the CIDCs. And if they are able to do that, that means then precision now comes in, and of course the quality is also improved. And also when it comes to welding, they are not able to buy the sophisticated and expensive equipment to do that, to weld, so that the quality, the finishing is as per the standards, the world standards. But now that's what the government's coming up with and saying, there are some equipment that are expensive which an individual SME will not be able to procure.
Ashok, you know, he's explaining, you know, various government institutions who are supposed to play a role in helping Kenya, you know, achieve its industrialization agenda.
Yes.
And in this country, we don't have a shortage of these organizations. We have the Kenya Research Institute and Development, something like that. And we also have the Kenya Industrial Estate. We also have a bank which is supposed to lend to
ICDC.
people who are venturing into industries. This is the
ICDC.
ICDC.
Yes.
Where are we not getting it right? Because you have a workforce that is ready. You have institutions that have been established, you know, to offer credit lines and even advice, you know, to these aspiring SMEs. But when you look at the rate we are churning out big companies out of our SMEs, it's very small. Where are we not getting it right?
Because since last 3-4 years, you know, like mainly our election time is affecting. So since 3-4 years, our economy is down. And when economy is down, people think twice. Even for the expansion, somebody want to expand, they will think twice that how can I expand in this kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I am very much hopeful that our future is very good because of the infrastructure development, which will bound to bring economical growth into Kenya.
Mm-hmm. When you are planning to, you know, start Infinity Business Park, I mean, number one, you know, a lot of investors, you know, they worry about, you know, the cost of electricity in this country.
Correct.
And, you know, the quality of energy in this country. Mm. The other issue has always been infrastructure, even though there has been a lot of investment, you know, going into infrastructure.
Correct.
The other issue was the issue of taxation.
Yes.
Did you consider all these, and how did you get convinced that, yeah, it is my time to invest in this?
I mean, for that purpose, people definitely need to have some assurance from the government that government should attract foreign investors to give them some taxation allowance for some years so that they establish the industries locally. And also government have to look into reducing electricity cost, because electricity is highly expensive in Kenya, and it is playing a major role into the cost of the production.
So how then do we position ourselves, you know, as a competitive industrial hub here in Africa? If, number one, transport cost is high.
Yes.
Number two, the cost of energy is also very high. And number three, the issue of corruption.
Yes. Mm. Yes, corruption is the major issue at present, and that is also government have to curb it somehow. And when government looking into the curbing corruption, definitely the economy will revive.
Mm-hmm. Tell me this, we have talked about the issue of infrastructure. We've talked about the issue of the cost of credit in this country. You know, accessing credit, you know, has always been a big challenge, you know, to SMEs. So how do we help them, you know, number one, to ease the transport burden and help them access a collateral, or I mean, not collateral, but a credit, you know, from commercial banks?
Well, even before I address that question on how to access the funds from commercial banks, the SMEs, I'll say that the government has actually put in place mechanisms to ensure that there is an MSE fund, and His Excellency the President directed that should be operational soonest. And I know that the regulations are underway, being developed, and that will go a long way to really enabling the MSEs access the funds without much of the need of the collaterals. And that will be very, very, very important for the sector to be jump-started and be competitive. The infrastructure is very key because, you know, Kenya, most of the the majority of the SMEs are actually in agribusiness. In the agribusiness, you'll find that we have those cottage or small industries across the country, and whatever they are doing needs to be transported from one point of one corner of the country to the other. So that is very key, and I think that has really enabled or assisted in the growth of the SMEs. You asked initially when we started, we talked about policy. I want also to mention that the government, cognizant of the fact that the SMEs are actually very key, there is a discussion that is going on in the country whereby all stakeholders are now being reached out to give comments on the review of the SME policy. And that will now cut across all the sectors, and the challenges the SMEs have been facing, they are now being addressed. For instance, today, the PS for Industry, Dr. Francis Owino, was in Nyeri, and they received all stakeholders from Central Kenya, and they gave their views. The other day they were in Kisumu, the other day they were in Embu, the other day they were in Garissa, they'll be going to Kajiado, they'll be going to Mombasa. So this is how the government is. It's listening to what needs to be improved in the SME policy to be able to assist them to really be the manufacturers, the big manufacturers of tomorrow, to transit from being micro to small, or from small to medium. And I think that is the focus. And I really want to say that what I've seen in the past, say 2-3 years, but mostly for the last 1 year, with the focus of the presidency on SMEs, because that is the real thing that needs to be appreciated, that there is a lot of funding. You know, when the government realizes and sees that really this is what needs to be done, and also the president has been directing in his speeches, even in a recently when he addressed the nation, he mentioned, he took about 12 minutes talking about SMEs. So that is the focus that we are having, and all government institutions are actually looking towards that and ensuring that these SMEs are facilitated to be able to deliver and also help the country realize the Vision 2030. Especially the Big Four agenda, whereby we're looking at manufacturing, we're looking at affordable housing. Actually, SMEs got a nod of, they got a contract to supply materials for the housing, affordable housing, worth more than 160 million shillings. And these are the Kenyan SMEs, and they supplied quality. So we are looking at, there is a lot that needs to be talked about and seen what the SMEs are doing, and the innovation. When we went to Rwanda, because we facilitated them to access markets, we went to Rwanda in December, and the government sponsored 222 SMEs from across the country. And you know, Kenya won the best prize on innovation. On innovation? Yes. You know, at the regional level? From the SMEs, yes. At the regional level. Yeah. Yes. Tell me this, I mean, Ashok, you know, when you look at, you know, the year 2012, we saw the government launch the National Industrialization Policy Framework that is supposed to run from, that was supposed to run from the year 2012 all the way to the year 2030. And the key objective was to facilitate company or investors, you know, to set up industries here in Kenya. And as you were saying, I mean, when you look at Kenya, we import almost 90% of all the things that we use in this country. Correct. Are we being serious when you look at the amount of products that we are importing in this country, whereas these are some products that can be actually be manufactured here? Correct. You know, there is, as I told you earlier, there is a lot of potential that we can manufacture a lot, because we also have a lot of resources to get the local raw material also. And but only that government have to work on it, on the track that they should attract and give assurance to the investors to come and establish industries over here. For that, they have to form a conference kind of things, to invite delegates from the industrialized country, and that is how it can be done. And would you advise other investors, you know, to come and invest here in this country, you know, having the kind of experience that you have, you know, in setting up a business here in Kenya? Definitely, because that is what we are doing since last many years, that what we are doing, and that is how I am developing an industrial park to provide the conducive environment. In our industrial park, we have planned to give plug and play situation, like if somebody want to come and put an industry in Kenya,
the land is available, service plot is available for them, and all the amenities and facilities within the park is available. Like water supply, power supply, fiber optic cable, and there's a lot of other amenities, A-class security, because that is the main concern people want to have it. So all that kind of facilities and infrastructure which we are developing in industrial park. So, and we have done a lot of marketing into the Middle East, China, India, and that is where we are attracting manufacturers to come and establish. Yes.
Samuel, where is the place of people in the IT industry or the IT sector, in your game plan?
Well, I say that one of the sectors that we are focusing on is services. That's where IT comes in. Let me mention that there is a program that through the World Bank that the micro and small enterprises is running, and we have assisted several innovations through that program who are in ICT and electronics. And more so now, what we are doing is that most of the SMEs are now being advised and guided to utilize e-commerce in whatever they are doing, so they are able to even upload their products, and then they are able to be seen across Africa and across the world. And there are several SMEs who have benefited from that. That is to reduce the cost of marketing, to be able to be visible, and to be able to even attract new buyers. And that's how we are utilizing that sector of ICT within the SME sector, SME sector, yes. Yes.
As we wind up, gentlemen, because time is not on our end, I want to hear from you. I mean, if you are given the mandate to advise the government, on how to fast track and hasten, Kenya's industrialization process, what would you say and what would you do?
We can hire top technocrats and top experts to advise us on that. That how can we improve, and many available in the world. So that is what government should do. That they should hire advisor. That how can we improve on industrialization. And I mean, there is one sector also, that the issue of the work permit. I will just experiencing that, because many people want to come here and settle here and want to put up a manufacturing plant. Now they are facing problem getting work permit. Government is charging 400,000 Kenya shilling for 2 years work permit. Now if person is coming here and paying 400,000 shilling, he will be definitely drawing at least salary of 100,000 or 200,000 shilling. From there yearly he will be paying another 500,000 to million shilling as a government tax also. So that kind of person otherwise will not come, and they are the actually job creators. So government should allow them that easy getting work permit, and should allow anybody, because if the person may not be educated, but he will be expert in something, and that is why we are inviting them to come here and do something. Like some of the production managers are there, they are expert in their job, and when they want to come here, they don't get the work permit here because they don't have the qualification.
But of course, there must be safeguards, to ensure that you don't have foreigners flooding the Kenyan market, and doing work that can be done by Kenyans.
People will, like ordinary people will not come paying at that cost. I will not like to invite somebody, ordinary person which is locally available, by spending on work permit expense, on airfare, paying high salary. Why? If locally available. So government should look into it.
They should look into that.
Yes.
So number one is to ease, the process of, acquiring a work permit, and number two, to make it cheaper, for expatriates.
Not cheaper. I'm not saying that the work make it to be cheaper. They should give easily. If somebody is applying, they should give it, because the person who is applying is not an ordinary person. He must be having some expertise. That is why people are inviting him to come here and do business.
Very well. Samuel.
Well, thank you. I think what we need to focus on is that we need to fast track all our processes and really work more with the SMEs because of their huge numbers, and of course be able to promote and assist them. And then of course there is this issue of the Biashara centers, which we say that most of the SMEs were initially they were not able, and majority of them are not able to access government services. And I think what has already been started at the Biashara center and what the President, His Excellency the President directed that should be replicated across the country, now they are able to access KRA, they are able to access KEPS, and they are able to access all the other institutions and without fear. And most importantly is that there are policies which are in place, which we are really working towards, because MSEA's big role is the coordination of all these activities. We are looking at the AGPO, we are looking at the local content, whereby, because an issue of why should we import what we are able to manufacture locally. So those should be emulated and actually really promoted, so that all the government institutions and all the Kenyan companies and all the regional buyers need to focus on the products which are locally available because of the local contents, to reduce on the imports as we promote and we love our own products that we are manufacturing because they're of high quality. I really want to really recognize what happened about a year ago when the local manufacturers were given the opportunity to supply uniforms for the disciplined forces. And that was very important. And so we have Kenyan manufacturers, and including the SMEs, who are actually able to come up with very unique and high quality products in quality and in quantities, and they need to be promoted, so that we also provide markets for them, because that's a big challenge that they are facing. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you so very much indeed for your time and for your insight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Samuel Matonda is the Business Development Director at the Micro, Small and Enterprise Authority, and Ashok Shah is an industrialist and a director at Infinity Park Business Park, joining us tonight on Business In.